So we have someone that's very definitely a covenanter, someone that has done a lot of work in different positions in the covenant. She is a pastor, she's a wife, she's a mom, and she's just a super woman all around. This is my friend, Pastor Lisa Orris. How are you, Lisa?
Good, Danny. Good to see you.
It's so good to see you. The first hard-hitting question I have for you is, why do I call you Lisa Lisa in the Cult Jam?
Yeah, that goes way back, doesn't it? You actually might remember that better than me, but I think it's when we worked on the feast together and you were part of the worship team and I was leading it at this crazy time when there was a flood and
Yeah.
there were fish under the tent that we were supposed to do. And I don't know. I think that's when you started calling me that.
For those people that are fairly new to the covenant, what was the feast? Can you tell us?
Yeah, it was kind of based on this every 3-year cycle, kind of like well, now Unite and some other events. And it was a multi-generational, multi-ethnic sort of gathering of people across the nation as families and as covenanters. And that was the year we had it up in Green Lake, Wisconsin. And it was crazy because it flooded and I was so new at what I was doing. I don't think I even knew what I was doing. So I did the best I could, but it was definitely a crazy time. But I think that's when we first met.
You were wonderful. Yeah, I was, you are such I was just telling you before we started recording, you're such a healing presence and such a calming presence, but you can also be very intense and, that makes you such a great preacher. You have had different positions within the covenant. Tell us a little bit about your position with the ACC that you held for a while.
Yes. So out of seminary, I had really been a part of the local church and I just wasn't sure that's what I wanted. And so I went to Gary Walter actually and asked him if I could do an internship in church growth and evangelism at the time. And he was so gracious and kind of coming alongside me and said, sure, like come and shadow me and be in leadership, meetings and learn. And so I did. And that led to kind of coaching and training and mentoring in the area of evangelism, which then led to being the director of evangelism for a while. And it was a wonderful experience for me. I learned so much about leadership, about people, about ministry, and had some wonderful mentors along the way. So it was a really good launching pad for me, I guess would be the way to say that. But then I found myself sort of feeling detached from the day-to-day sort of in the trenches kind of ministry, because you kind of get off an airplane and go to a church and then you leave. And so I was really missing that relational piece. And that kind of led me back then to the local church. So it's kind of a joke at my church. It was at the beginning because I would always be like, I see you people every week. Like, I'm not used to this, the same people every week. They start to make fun of your mannerisms and, it's been great though. It's been a great road back. So, yeah.
So there's so much I want to ask you, but tell us a little bit about your church. I've had the pleasure to visit you at Hope, and I've seen what a great congregation it is. Tell us a little bit about your church.
Yeah, a place called Hope, boy. It is literally this church on the corner in Crystal Lake, and I've been there 8 years. Came as they self-identified as a critical moment church 8 years ago, and it was critical moment in every facet, from finances to facilities to staff. It was critical moment. And the leaders would say, that I was, Bill and I first together, and then the last several years on my own here would say that, I came and helped them revitalize, but actually it has been this beautiful relationship between us that I think is what's helped to get the church back healthy again and moving in the right missional direction. And it's been the courage really of the leaders who were willing to say, like, we can't keep doing it the way we've done it or we're going to die. And I just kind of came in at the right time with some of the gifts they needed. And so we've kind of forged this beautiful relationship in the midst of it. So yeah, and been through some really, really hard things together. So and that's, I think, what's fostered the relationship even deeper.
You are an awesome preacher. You have the ability of the spoken word, but it is not just being able to give a good speech. You engage your congregation in a really, really amazing manner. But you've also been hitting some very difficult subjects during the last few months, and this is pre-COVID. You've been talking about some interesting issues. Why don't you share some of those with us?
Yeah, so probably about a year ago, we did a series on immigration, and our demographic is a mostly white church, though I would say we have plenty of people of color in our congregation, and we also partner with a Latino congregation as well. And so Pastor Alex and I have done things in tandem, particularly around immigration issues. And so I always say at Hope Church, like, we're not afraid of the hard stuff. We're not afraid to go head on into those deeper, harder topics that maybe some churches would want to not talk about, be in denial about, ignore. So we've hit that pretty head on. And then even now during COVID, before COVID, we had planned to watch the movie Just Mercy together, like actually the week before we went into quarantine. And so that got delayed, but we actually did a Zoom discussion around it and 2 follow-ups around it, and had wonderful interaction around issues of social justice. And so again, you know, not easy topics, obviously, but we're also not afraid of it. And we've had some really open, honest conversations that feel like the deeper work of the gospel, and not just like showing up to church. So that's been really awesome for us in this time.
Lisa, to some of our pastor friends that will be listening to this who know you, let me ask you the following question. What makes a good sermon? What do you strive to do in each sermon? And what is some of that special recipe that
Oh, well, probably if you asked me or if you asked my church, you would get maybe 2 different answers. But you know, so many times people will say to me, like, why are you making me cry? I'm always crying. Like, we have Kleenexes up and down the rows in our church. and I, you know, people walk in, they're like, what's all the Kleenexes? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, people cry here a lot. But I think what I have found in my own story, in my own pain, is that pain speaks to pain. Deep calls out to deep. And when you, I think, are in the pulpit and are willing to share parts of your life that way, and not like in a, you know, Henry Nouwen says it best, that you know, you can't get up in the pulpit and bleed all over everybody. That doesn't help anybody.
Right.
You have to be binding your own wounds at the same time. But I think as we're doing that, and as we share in those wounds and in that solidarity, that for me is like, if I haven't lived that during the week, there's no way I'm going to stand up on Sunday morning and expect anybody else to feel it, or expect anybody else to be moved or touched. Like, if it hasn't affected me, then why get up and say it? Like, so for me, it's living it, it's being in it, it's being vulnerable, and finding those points of connection with the people. That for me, I think, is authentic and real. And I mean, there were times, Danny, I don't know, in the last several years. I mean, I remember one time I just got up and I was like, I'm like, I don't have anything today. I said, I don't have anything. Um, and people were weeping with me. And I just kind of sat down and that was it. So I don't know. It doesn't sound like a really good homiletical format, but it, I think it's how God has used me and used us together as a church. So yeah.
You have a relationship with a church that shares your building, and it's been an intentional relationship with a Latina church.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, you were sharing and not only doing that, but you were doing joint services throughout the year as well. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Yeah. Somebody in our church had an assignment to visit other local churches. And so there was a Latina church plant that was meeting in Crystal Lake. And at the time, they were looking for another place to meet and got us connected. And Pastor Alex and I just completely hit it off, and we welcomed them in. And we try to do at least once a quarter bilingual services together, both of our congregations. And it has been so rich. And we continue to learn together through ministry. He's been a great listener for me and just a colleague alongside, and me alongside him, and seeing their church kind of thriving. And yeah, so it's been a great partnership. And I think we both have dreams and visions of it to be more. And we're going to keep dreaming and visioning that. Maybe not as much separation as there is, and more overlap. And so we keep dreaming about what that could look like. So,
Do you consider yourself an extrovert?
a what?
An extrovert?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So how has COVID been for you as an extroverted person and as a pastor who likes
Yeah.
to be relational with
Yeah.
your people?
Right. Super interesting. I think what happened to me at the beginning is after December, I kept saying, like, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I didn't get much of a break in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like a break was coming, but I just wasn't sure when I could take it. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And so in a weird sort of way, the beginning of it was really rest for me. It just, everything shut down. And so it just became rest for me. And then it became a time to like hit the ground again and being innovative and creative, because we're not a big production church. Like, I'm using a borrowed camera in my basement, like, to figure out what we're going to do. Like, and it's like been a miracle that we've even pulled off what we have. But I say, like, we're gritty, we're scrappy. So, we figure it out. So I think that had helped some of the connection, but I think maybe the introvert in me that longs for quiet and rest really got some of that I really, really needed. And so I was very, very grateful for that. But I would say in the last couple months, I've been pretty antsy, like more antsy, and trying to like be patient in this process as we're trying to lead the church well and lead our community well. So, but yeah, it's been quite the thing, quarantine and all of it. So, yeah.
You have been a very helpful partner to me in the conference. You've been a great soundboard of ideas, and we've all had to, being in a position that we're in now, it's you have to deal with so many people. Not everybody is what I call Latino friendly, that understands the culture or that understands the rationality of the covenant. And you have been very helpful, especially in the area of women ministry, how to support well, what are, how to break some patriarchal things that have been so normal and so permanent in our society. But I'm not really the only person that asks you for advice. A lot of people come to you and ask you for wisdom. You being an advocate for several of our pastors, and you walk with people. Tell me about your desire to be such an advocate, specifically in the area of women in ministry.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know like how that all happened, but I find myself mentoring and coaching about 3 to 4 young female pastors right now. And I love it. And I think the reason I love it is because they are so gifted, and they are so committed, and they are so ready, and yet they sometimes keep coming up against these barriers or relationships in ministry, particularly with male colleagues, um, that they weren't expecting, and that it's super hard to navigate that when you've never had to do that before, or it's a first call. And so you're not only trying to navigate collegial relationships, you now have to navigate an entire congregation who maybe has never had a female before. So there are just so many layered issues, right? And for whatever reason, I feel like I've navigated some of those, and because I had really good mentors that helped me. And so I feel like it's my turn, and it's my turn to pour into these young female pastors who I think, like, I keep saying to several of them, I'm like, you're going to light the covenant on fire. Like, I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to be a part of that. But now what I'm sensing is it's a really formational time for them. Like, even though some of it is frustrating, some of it is a deep struggle, I keep uh, telling them and advocating and saying to them, like, you are being formed and shaped in this moment, not for right now, but for what God has you for leadership in the future. And sometimes, obviously, you and I both know that's a hard thing to hold on to, when you're in the midst of struggle and pain. But yeah, I feel very committed to that, and it takes time. Sometimes I'm on the phone an hour at a pop, with several different people, but it is so worth it, because I feel like this is the future. This is the next generation. This is me at some point handing the mantle over, and we need strong female leaders who really have a sense of themselves. And I think that's one of the things I also kind of hone in with them. Like, I say over and over again, like, you got to forget about all the crazy people around you, because there's going to be crazy people around you all the time, right? And
Right.
poking at you, prodding you, whatever it is. Like, you've got to work on yourself, and you have to become self-aware, and you have to start binding your own wounds so that you're not leaking all over everybody and blaming everybody else for your current situation, right? Like, it's got to start with you. And so as I see growth, which I have in all of them, like, it's just been amazing to watch. And so but yeah, I feel very, very committed to that. And really, it's life-giving for me, to have those really honest, hard conversations, but find it very life-giving. So
And I
yeah.
think that's what makes you a great pastor and a great mentor, because you do not only walk with people, but you know how to shake someone up as well. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your candor and your transparency when especially in our friendship. I'm grateful to count you as a friend. But you do not play games. You know, you're gonna walk with people, but they have to walk too. You know,
Yes.
and you're not gonna play the victim card. You are gonna empower people, and there's gonna be struggles, tough. Let's do them anyways, and
Yes.
let's move on. Is that how, how did you come about that style? Is that your personality? Is that what you've seen work best? What would you say
Yeah.
about that?
Well, I think I've thought about that a lot. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Like I grew up in Pittsburgh in a, blue collar, mostly Italian family. Um, I had a dad who told me I could do anything boys could do. I could probably do it better. Like that's the kind of dad I had. So, um, I guess there was always like a thing in me, like, um, you shoot straight with people and they appreciate that, like even if it's hard. But I think it's a combination. I was also an athlete, so um, I think you learn to push through things athletically. You also learn that you may have to work harder than the next person often. And so those are all really good lessons, I think, that have kind of formed and shaped me. I'm also an 8 on the Enneagram,
Mhm.
and female 8s are the most misunderstood number on the Enneagram because I don't know, I just think people just like they don't know what to do with us because, and I don't really know why that is. So I'm pretty aware of that. Like, my kids would often say, like, if they would bring home like a new girl or a new guy, they would be like, you're so intimidating. Like, why are you like that? Like, they feel, I'm like, what did I do? Like, I just walked in the room.
You said
Like,
hello.
you know,
Yeah.
so they would get so mad at me. But I think I've become more aware of that. Like, there's just this, I don't know. So I have to be aware of that I think I have that tendency, like, or presence or whatever it is. And I don't, I don't mean to be like that, but I am more aware of it. And so I've learned to lean into the more softer side of me, which there is a softer side for sure. Um, but yeah, I just think, when you grow up as a girl in Pittsburgh, you play with footballs, you don't play with dolls. And that's just the way it is. So, yeah,
So what would your advice be to eights in the Enneagram is power
yeah,
and assertiveness, to the point, etc. And that works well sometimes for our male colleagues and not so much for our female colleagues, right? So what's your advice for someone that is very assertive, has, obviously develop, it has that kind of personality.
yeah,
How do you soften the blow, like you just said? How
yeah,
do you counter that? Because obviously it's not, our ministry is not about personality, and and it's not even about our opinion. It's
right,
about the gospel, right?
right,
But we have to do ministry in a way that's going to be effective because we deal with other people. It's not just my personality. How
right.
do you counter up? How do you work that? How
Yeah,
have you done that?
yeah. I think what I've learned is, like, I've learned to speak my truth so that I can still stand and have a voice, but not in a way that is demanding or rolls over people. Because I've also learned that I can roll over people really fast. Like, I mean, I can be mouthy. Like, I know that about myself. I've been like that my whole life, right? And it's not how I want to be. Um, but I think what I've learned is I can still speak my truth, but in ways where people can hear it. So I've learned to ask a lot of questions, or help me to understand, or do reflective listening. Like, I hear you saying, like, is this what you meant? And that I have found, like, really goes a long way. Like, seeking to understand and not, I would always, I think, be quick to assign meaning and motive to people, right? Like, because I would just react. Like, well, I know what you thought, or I know what you were thinking. Well, no, I don't. Like, I can't assign meaning and motive and just come at somebody. So I've learned to, well, what did you mean by that? Or you said this, is this what you meant? And so I think I've actually become a better listener. So then my responses, while still maybe hard or, um, having to speak the truth in love, there is a sense that like people still feel like I care about them, if that makes sense, because I think I've learned to listen better. Um,
And I think you just hit it right on the head. Relationships, right?
yes,
And how can I tell you something difficult without
right,
a relationship?
right, right.
And I think the best pastors are people that definitely invest in their congregations. Um, who are people in the covenant that have invested in you? Who are people that mentored you?
Yeah. Art Greco would be one of those people. Um, Back in the day, man, I don't know. I guess he saw something in me that I I couldn't see then. And I remember him asking me to send him like somewhere I spoke, and I don't know where it was. And he's like, well, send me the tape. Yes, that's how old I am. I sent him the tape.
You send them
Uh,
an eight track
yeah,
or
no, I cassette tape. Like, oh my gosh. Um, and
it's called We Are, by the way, not
yeah,
not just You Are. We
yeah.
Are.
He I'll never forget what he said to me. He's like, you are gonna be a really great preacher one day. He's like, but here's the problem. He's like, you take off like a rocket, and he's like, and you just go and keep. He's like, people can't handle that kind of intensity for too long. He's like, you got to learn to like bring people up and then let them come down. And it was the best advice anybody had ever given me. I will never forget that. And he's invested in my life. I just saw him about 6 months ago, over 20 years now. Dave Olson, Gary Walter, Lon Allison. These are, people who've really kind of, you know, did I say Gary Walter? Yeah, I think I mentioned him earlier. Just kind of, sort of helped me along the way. So,
Well, you
yeah.
mentioned some of our giants in the faith in the covenant,
Yeah.
especially Lon Allison.
Mm.
Tell me one or two things that you've learned through this pandemic about being a pastor. What are
Ooh,
is there something that surprised you? I mean, I'm grateful that you got some rest,
yeah.
but you're not someone that likes to rest for too long. What
Yeah.
yeah, what are some lessons that you're taking away with this?
Yeah. Um, well, being in front of the camera has been horrible. Like like awkward, terrible. I don't know. Think of any other word to describe it. And I think it's because of what you and I just said. Like the preaching moment for me has always been relational. Like I'm not a lecturer. I'm not downloading information. I'm not. It's always been about the congregation helping me. Like when I get stuck, when I stumble over my words, when I do something stupid and people laugh, or, they're with me, like helping me preach the gospel. So to do that in front of a camera, like, no, it's been terrible. I've done it because, and I've had arguments with like some of my staff because they're like, Lisa, this is the only way, the church is going to be able to connect with you. Like, you have got to figure this out. Like, this can't be about you because Lisa Orris doesn't like to be in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Well, I threw a fit for weeks, and I finally I'm like, okay, like I can do this. Like I can do it. And so we've been doing it, and I still don't like it. And I will still, as I sit here, say the preaching moment is relational. It's always has been. We don't preach the gospel alone. We preach it together, always. And so that's been really, really hard and really, really painful during this time. So, um, I think that, and also there's been revelation, I think, about some things that have been hard to realize, that um, maybe we're not as connected as we thought we were in some ways. Um, and people, I've learned, are just so overwhelmed, so stressed out, so struggling in their own life, that I think the church and their spiritual life kind of gets pushed somewhere. And that's been really, really hard um, to help people stay connected and engaged in ways that we've tried, but still feeling like, wow, like this is really hard. So we're gonna have our first in-person service this Sunday. Like,
Wow.
yeah, the first time in 4 months. So we're gonna be outside and 10 feet apart and the whole thing. And there's part of me that's dreading it, because it's gonna be, again, like the camera, it's gonna feel awful. But at the same time, I'm hoping that God's gonna kind of surprise us, and it'll be sort of a sweet, time to be together. So yeah, rough, rough. Lots
I'm
of
so,
lessons.
I'm so grateful for you, Lisa.
Thank you, Pastor
Thank
Dan.
you for being a pastor. Thank you for being someone that is so supportive of the Central Conference, and I've certainly felt so supported by you in my superintendency. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Yeah,
for all of that.
thank you. It's a privilege to support you.
Thank you. And you mentioned someone, Bill. Bill who? Who are you
Mm,
talking about? Who is
mm.
that Bill?
Yeah, that one, Bill
Bill,
Orris.
Bill
Yeah,
has served in our executive board for this past
yes.
2.5 years. Actually, Lisa, I'm starting my 4th year in September.
Wow. Wow, that went
Time has,
fast. Yeah,
time
that
has
went
gone
super
by
fast.
fast. So
Yeah.
I am grateful of the way that you have shown and modeled healing through your own life.
Mm,
I'm grateful that your congregation has a pastor that calls them out, loves them, has a
mm.
relationship with them, and yeah, I'm just really grateful for you, Lisa. I'm
Praise
excited
God.
about what the Lord will continue to do for you, and thank you so much for taking such great care of there's so many pastors that seek your advice, and
Mm,
I know that we have benefited from your wisdom and your organizational skills with
mm.
when we have our celebrations, which we didn't have one this year.
Yeah.
But we want to continue to gather women. We want to continue to support them, and we
Yep.
want you to continue to be a voice on how to do that better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I had no idea. I've seen you doing this. I thought it was great. I was like, oh, sure. I'd love to do that. So thank you. It's been fun. It's good to see your face.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is good to see your face for sure. And hoping to get together and grab a meal or get some coffee when this pandemic is done.
Definitely.
Blessings on your church as you open this Sunday, and
Yes.
blessings
Thank
on
you.
all you do, Pastor Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you,
Blessings to
Danny.
you.
All right. Good to see you.